Aphoristic Appendage to On Truthtelling. 651 to 700. 651. Said the predator to his prey, "My love for you is so intense, so all-consuming, that I must hold you in a fatal embrace and make you one with me." 652. Political talk, however much it may be necessary as part of a systematic effort to guide and change human behavior, will never be the most honest or truthful. To put the matter rather bluntly, except for long after the fact, politicians can never admit their proximity to or complicity in coercive, corrupt, and even cruel practices. 653. The political will never be able to bring about a perfect world because its means can never be pure, its practical course never so straight and unerring that it doesn't end up, at least to some degree or other, making a mockery of its putative ends. 654. What is called truth at any particular time is that, plus an associated dogma. The two are inseparable. 655. Excessive repetition of anything, rather than reinforcing it, should make one suspicious of it. 656. Discrimination based on race, sex, age, social standing, etc. can never be eliminated but only minimized. Let anyone who thinks differently show themselves to be possessed of God-like virtues or capable of angelic effects. 657. Energy, grace, good looks, all go on the side of youth. What? And some of you would even grant it, as if to rob all later life of some redeeming quality or meaningful advantage, depth. 658. What is genius? A select number of moments in the lives of a select number of people. The rest of their lives, apart from the work, is non-genius. 659. Free speech is an important principle almost universally acknowledged in democratic society, but with the caveat of its having certain limitations. The problem is, and forever will be, that where some people see such and such limitations as being just and necessary, others see them as being arbitrary and an infringement on their right to free speech. 660. One side sees radical social change as the brave new world to come. The other side sees it as the destruction of the world already in place and in which they feel most at home. Is anybody wrong here? Is anybody right? Surely not in their basic attitude, but only in the 1,001 ways this attitude can manifest itself as a prolonged and wide-sweeping struggle. The devil is in the details, a cliché that, unlike most others, can bear repeating. 661. Jogger, running past graveyard. "Hi guys, how you doin'? Graveyard, we're waiting for you." Jogger, "Not today, thanks, at least if I can help it." Graveyard, "Well, we have time." 662. Yes, it's terrible. Yes, it's outrageous. Yes, it's deceitful and dishonest and stupid and so many other things. And yet, like so many others, I'm fascinated by it. Fascinated by what? You know. You can't help but know. The Daily News. 663. I must confess that I've never been able to talk with the wholesale certainty that so many people do, often well but also often badly, on so many subjects. Yes, it's a gift that some people have. I'm talking about the few that do it well, that allows them to carry on some very interesting, engaging, and I dare say vital talk. On the other hand, as truth-tellers trying to tell all on matters that will forever remain infinitely complex, their wholesale certainty is as bogus as much of what they likely criticize, condemn, or confront. 664. A common human weakness is that, once we have identified some person, group, or country as the enemy, we only want to hear the worst about it. Anything else tends to go against that almost universal desire to see our judgments and opinions confirmed. Needless to say, this weakness is exploited by all who have a vested interest in shaping public opinion. 665. Generally speaking, ad hominem arguments say much more about the person using them than they do about the person being attacked by them. 666. People who have a very strong and determined point of view, whether they be professionals or not, often show that they don't accept a contrary view by abusing both it and the one who expresses it. 667. When an interviewer repeatedly uses the line, "You didn't answer my question," he seems to be implying that his questions are God-given or at least framed with such care, precision, and high seriousness that they should be answered squarely on all points, in a sort of catechetical way. 668. Time rolls on, time rolls on. Everyone says this and, you know what? It does. 669. Perhaps if we had the right perspective on things and didn't take so much for granted, we would think every time we had a pleasant encounter with a strange and even familiar individual, boy, that was lucky. 670. Yes, one may say that the world has improved greatly in this or that, but there still remains the fundamental question which may also be called the Hamlet question: has it grown more honest? 671. When it comes to the expression of so much hostility in the comment sections of certain online forums, one can only think, so many people must have lives that fall short of their expectations for so much energy to be expended like this. 672. To go by all the talk nowadays, one would think that it's more heinous to hate someone for their skin color, ethnicity, sex, or sexual orientation than it is to hate them for some other more or less unjustifiable reason. 673. When you're very young, getting old seems almost impossible. When you're very old, being young once seems almost like a fiction. 674. The only news that knocks us off our pedestals is personal, while all other news, we must factor in here how it is fashioned and how we select it, tends to make us think we're on one. 675. Since the news media in either a presumably democratic or non-democratic society has a vested interest in slanting a sizable number of stories for profit or political reasons, how can there be anything other than fake news? 676. Morally speaking, what makes this world complicated beyond measure is that entertainment, or at least a fair part of it, is irretrievably caught up in horror. After all, is it not the case that more than a few people will watch a war on TV or at the movies, let us leave aside all other scenes of cruelty and violence, with popcorn? 677. When there are no more people watching wars on TV or at the movie theater while eating popcorn, whether these wars be real or not, then I'll believe in the New Jerusalem. B. I hardly know what you're saying. Well, you see, it's built in. Failure in the moral sphere is every bit as inevitable as the will to make things perfect, to put before our eyes, in however imperfect a way, some utopia. 678. Anyone who is inclined to think that a leader who has had a string of victories on the world stage is likely to have the same success in the future should, if they don't want to risk being rudely shocked, keep in mind that such historical figures as Julius Caesar, Napoleon Bonaparte, and Adolf Hitler had their string of victories. 679. When interests coincide, peace is precious. When they don't, maintaining relationships isn't given priority. Perhaps it's not so surprising then that, under the latter conditions, disruptions or downward turning events occur which can range from breaking off a friendship to unleashing the dogs of war. 680. What is reality? A multitude of perspectives, opinions, beliefs, theories, etc., with each one claiming with a rather high degree of confidence, if not dead certainty, that it is much closer to the truth than all others. 681. What is the present? The reality we most take to heart along with the idea that we matter. 682. To be a moral crusader without being partisan, that is, without having a prejudice, would be a magnificent but perhaps impossible feat, but what does seem possible is that even an imperfect approximation of this would rise to the level of being messianic in ways hitherto unimagined. 683. It may be that having variety in our lives trumps everything else. If so, the moral sphere would have its value as being a great contributor to this state of affairs despite its encompassing much that is opposed to much else in this world, which usually goes by the name of bad, and even bent on its annihilation. 684. The private parts of our bodies correspond to the secret parts of our lives that, however common they are and however much a part of the human condition, we would like to go unnoticed and have forgotten, as if they had no significance, but perhaps it's all the other way, with respect to our being recognized as members of society in good standing. 685. The pain that can be inflicted on us up to atrocious levels makes the present moment the nerve center of our universe. 686. In the name of honesty and perhaps much else, being on the right side of a political issue shouldn't mean being excused one's worst faults and failings. But given that the morality of such issues often has a fashionable and consequently favoring side to it, it is common enough. 687. Bowel movements are a big enough part of our life but a small part of our conversation. What is indigestible is that they are the most animal part of us that even the animal can't dignify. 688. The main difference between being young and being old is that, on the one hand, there is the perpetual promise of getting something and, on the other, the perpetual threat of losing the thing once gotten. 689.
Aochic looking down at herself only cela teste standard for la beauté décontractée.
690. Even the most beautiful lass has to wipe her ass. 691. Trust should be highest with those who speak with an open mind and heart. All others, with possibly a few exceptions, should be listened to with caution. 692. Of all large-scale activities, perhaps politics is the one that tries hardest to fit itself to the times. However, it is precisely this keeping one's eye on the ball in world affairs, this narrow focus on what seems to be most pressing and practical that make the majority of politicians overlook much that pertains to the times or rather to time itself. Not being the most adept readers of past, present, and future, they fail to see it as being less a technocratic tool than the shifting sands of all things. 693. The problem with the press is not so much that it lies, but that it takes up one perspective and magnifies it to the point that all others, if not entirely hidden, are devalued and dismissed. 694. To read a Shakespearean play is to have before one's eyes an incredible amount of treachery. Getting rid of it is surely a long-standing moral or political objective. As a major stumbling block, however, there is the fact that, when the worst is thrown out the back, it can always find its way in through the front and vice versa. 695. If progress is the same as growth, then it must have its declining course as well as its ascending one. It may be that, after centuries of political and moral struggle, the whole thing gets confused and no longer recognizes itself. It may even be that it grows senile. Forever the optimist, aren't you? Well, a person wouldn't be called a pessimist for, but I understand your point. When it comes to modern-day progress, it's supposed to go on indefinitely. We shouldn't dismiss this possibility out of hand. Believing this, I would say, is going from science to religion on the secular level. 696. Yes, each and every one of us is unique, but it still remains true that all we think, feel, and imagine comes from the world or, to put it another way, from what we normally think is over against us. 697. You say having more women in politics is a great thing, but I say having more people fall into line by following the party line isn't. 698. It is the case that many who are attracted to a certain position and convinced by the arguments put forward to justify it have little patience or tolerance for anything that contradicts it short of a bombshell. 699. Many if not the vast majority of people will hold until their dying day that certain values, principles, and ideals have, unlike a human life, no expiry date. However, absolute proof of this could only be attained by having universal agreement on all these points as well as related ones. In short, universal agreement on everything. 700. One way to keep a healthy perspective on current debates in the public arena is to imagine how they would have appeared to our forebears and how they will appear to those yet to come.